every MSP wants to sell more cybersecurity to their existing clients and also to the new logo business that's starting with you. And that makes sense because the more protection they buy from you, the more protected they are, and actually the more protected you are. I realize that security is probably the one thing that's most likely to keep you awake at night, right? Well, if that is the case, you're going to love my special guest right now. He is a true expert at selling more cybersecurity, and his approach to it is very natural and very authentic. He believes you can turn cybersecurity into compelling stories that you tell to your clients.
Hello, I'm Adam Pill, and I'm a cybersecurity advisor at Heimdall Security.
Thanks so much for joining us on the show, Adam, because we're going to talk about something very important today. How do you persuade more of your clients to spend more on cybersecurity, to protect themselves, to listen to you, and actually realize how big a deal it is? And as we are here, sort of getting towards the middle of 2026, you and I know that cybersecurity is 50 million times more important than it was last year and the year before and the year before that. But the ordinary business owners and managers out there, they don't know that. So that's what we're trying to do in the next 10, 15 minutes or so, is to give the MSPs who are listening to this or watching this on YouTube some weapons, some tools that they can use to help business owners to protect themselves. So let's first of all just delve into your background. How did you end up with a fantastic job like the one you've got right now?
Certainly, yeah. So my background is in law enforcement. I was actually a police officer for 15 years. And latterly, I led something called the Covert Operations Management Unit, which was 3 distinct teams. The Covert Authorities Bureau, the guys responsible for obtaining lawful authorities in relation to covert activity, whether it be real world surveillance or the online world hacking accounts. Second team, communication data investigators, the guys and girls responsible for obtaining communications data from like Google, Facebook, Apple, and then locally from telephone and internet service providers. And then, as you're probably expecting, the final team, the cybercrime team, conducting cybercrime investigations, but also providing that tactical digital support in relation to traditional investigations, whether it be harassment through to murder.
Amazing. And what was one of the most astonishing, or some of the most astonishing things that you saw during your law enforcement career?
Yeah, I think it's a real array what you see. It exposes you. I started relatively young in the police, and yeah, I think it's the fact that there's all types of different life going on, and the standards that you have in your own life are very different in the other side of this world. So yeah, lots of different experiences, but I very much came away, I think, with the mentality of the people are people. We all ultimately got the same aim as we care for the people that are closest to us. And whether you are a drug user or someone that's top of the game in the business world, we're all people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess people are predictable to a certain extent, which I guess the police rely on that, don't they? That predictable nature, and we all screw up as well, which I guess is another important part of it. Yeah. So let's talk now about helping to protect business owners from themselves. So you talk to loads of MSPs. Yeah. What do you think? Well, let me before I ask for your advice on what MSPs can do. Where are we right now? So what's the kind of, because you know a lot more about cybersecurity than perhaps anyone else, because anyone else listening to this or watching this, because you're right there at the front line every day. It's not just an aspect of what you do, it is what you do. So where are we right now in terms of awareness from business owners, in terms of their willingness to invest, in terms of their compliance with what their managed service provider suggests to them?
Yeah, I think it's on their radar for sure. Business owners now recognize cybersecurity. They understand there's a degree of importance to it, but we're still at that point, no further. There's that motivation to actually take action. There's that lack of confidence. There's that not sure. There's not enough money. And quite often I'll speak to MSPs and they'll say they'll have multiple bundles. Bundle 1, the beginner level, then you've got the medium, and then you've got the higher tier, the premium tier security package they offer. And the majority of their customers, they take budget, because it's really difficult for business owners to understand that cybersecurity has different levels. And yes, you might be spending what you deem to be a lot of money on cybersecurity, but it doesn't make you secure. Even at the premium level, you're never 100% guaranteed. So business owners, I think, struggle with understanding that they need to spend maybe a bit more money than they'd ideally like to in order to give them the level of protection they want. And I think we're very much stuck in a compliance stage at the moment, as in ticking boxes to get certificates, which give us a false sense of security.
Yeah, or yeah, I can understand that. And do you think that sort of mismatch with the business owners and the MSPs is because in the channel we're reading about it every day, we're seeing what happens when companies get breached, talking to people like yourself, whereas business owners, unless it's happened to someone they know, it's not real, is it? It's almost like being burgled, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly like it, and that's exactly how I'd always try and explain it. Bring it into something real world that everyone can understand. Even if you haven't been burgled, you could imagine what it would feel like to some degree. It wouldn't be a nice experience, and yeah, exactly that. So we need to compare it to things that are realistic. And for most business owners, yeah, their LinkedIn feeds, their news feeds, their social media feeds are going to be from peers, so they're not generally going to be talking about cybersecurity. Whereas like the likes of you and I, maybe MSPs, we're going to see a lot more about cybersecurity. It's going to feel more real. And obviously myself, having dealt with cybersecurity for the police for a number of years, I've seen it from all angles, from the victims to arresting the cyber criminals themselves.
Yeah, I can imagine. There's a story, I think I've told it in the podcast before, where I once, very, very long time ago, like 25 years ago, I lived in a city called Nottingham in the UK, and I lived in the rough part of Nottingham. We got burgled twice in 6 months. And it was funny, after we'd been burgled the second time and it sort of word got around the neighbours, burglar alarms started appearing on some of the houses. So, that street, and we were perhaps the worst house in the street, but once it was the guy next door or the guy 2 doors away, it actually became real for them, and people actually started to think about prevention because of what happened to us. And I would imagine it's exactly the same with cybersecurity right now. So I know that you have a very robust 3-pronged approach, which you recommend that MSPs use. Can you take us through what those 3 prongs are, and sort of perhaps go into some detail and just explain why you would use each of the 3 prongs when talking to business owners?
Yeah, certainly. So trust, clarity, and storytelling are the 3 prongs I use. So trust is really important, and it's becoming day by day even more important. So if I say to you fake news, AI generated content, deep fakes, that's the angle I'm thinking of right now. We no longer know what is true or not. I was watching a video the other day on YouTube, and I was questioning at the end, is it real or not? And I didn't know. I still don't know. And that's where we're at. We don't know what is real. We don't know what is fake. Whether it be phishing emails, they're getting better quality. Whether it be the video call right now. I said to you when I first joined the call, it felt strange. I've seen you so many times, stood there, but now you're talking back to me. So we don't know what is real. So we need to make sure that we have people that we trust in our lives, in terms of people that can give us good quality information that we know is going to give us good quality information in terms of protecting ourselves, but also processes to protect ourselves. So when we're thinking about deep fakes and potentially payment fraud type scams, where we heard, I think it was last year now, of the company that paid out $25 million because a deepfaked CFO came onto a call and told the employee to do it. So having processes helps protect us and helps build that trust element. And I think as well, and we slightly touched on this really, but the clarity and the storytelling piece. So with clarity, it's all about making things simple. So it could be, like you've just described, about talking or comparing cybercrime to burglary, making it making it appear like something that people recognize, that they can relate to, that they actually understand. Because quite often when it comes to cybersecurity, if you say cybersecurity, people, they may go, oh, that's dull, or that's technical, I don't understand, which that's not where we want people to be. So the simpler and clearer we can make it, then the better it is. And storytelling, for me, it's a winner every time, because it engages people. If you think about the stuff that we all watch on the telly, what's on Netflix, what's on the cinemas, it's crime-based drama. Well, that's what cybersecurity is. So if we can get people engaged by storytelling, then they'll come away and they will take those little nuggets with them into the future, into their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and there's a reason we still enjoy storytelling for our entertainment, and I think will certainly for our lifetimes, and potentially for the rest of time, the rest of however long humanity is around. Because back in the day, that was how we learnt information. So before we could write, back in caveman times, we were passing information to our children by telling them stories. And if you put someone through a functioning MRI machine and tell them a story, all these parts of their brain light up, which means they're making connections, which means they remember. Versus telling telling them the same story as a series of facts, one part of their brain lights up and they don't tend to remember so much. So let's delve a bit more into that. So for what kind of stories would you tell? I mean, I know that a lot of MSPs are scared of using FUD, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt, quite rightly. It's completely the wrong way, I believe, and I'm sure you believe as well, to try and educate people about cybersecurity. But if it's not fear and uncertainty and doubt, what kind of stories should we be telling?
I think we've got to be careful around the FUD piece, first of all, because I totally agree we shouldn't be using it consciously and intentionally. But I would also say, unfortunately, part of cybersecurity does come with an element of FUD. We can't sugarcoat it. It's not a nice experience. It's not somewhere you want to be. Just like in the burglary story we spoke about earlier, people acted because of FUD. So we shouldn't sugarcoat it, but equally, that should not be our motivating factor to scare people to take action. So the way I always do it is I'm lucky enough to be able to refer back to cases, cybercrime cases that I investigated, I dealt with, that I've seen firsthand. So I tell those stories and then intertwine them into what would now be what's happening in the real world. So it might be an insider case that I dealt with, or a certain crime case I dealt with, whether it be cybercrime or not. Use that story to then draw in the comparisons of an MSP's life, a business owner's life, and then bring to them the sort of moral of the story being the action they need to take, the things they need to be thinking about. But by doing that, it engages them and they are passively learning rather than having to sit through a presentation, hopefully, rather than having to sit through a presentation while they're waiting for the end.
That makes sense. And I worked with them as an MSP a few years ago who had a client who was about to sign up with them, and they got their Outlook got breached, and someone edited a PDF, and they paid. I think it was a very large amount of money for a house purchase to the wrong bank account. And I don't know how it is around the world, but here in the UK, if a lawyer does that, the lawyer is responsible for that money. So that nearly took that entire business down. And the MSP I knew was using that story to educate other lawyers about A, the dangers, and B, this is how you protect yourself from this kind of business email compromise attack happening. So for MSPs, obviously you've got your police career and your police stories to lean back on. For MSPs, for those who've had those scares, should they be referring to those and telling those stories, anonymized, of course? But then what about those MSPs who are perhaps a little bit newer to the game, haven't had those scares yet? Should they take the kind of stories that they're hearing elsewhere and turn those into stories to use?
Yeah, certainly. So I would also look at big cases or interesting cybercrime cases that happen internationally. So whether that be, and we mentioned before the call, Marks and Spencer's in the UK, which is a large and a very old famous retail chain, they got hit last year by a cyber attack, and that was big news across the UK. Not only was it on our mainstream media or the news every night, but people were seeing the impact in the shops because there was certain food that was missing, empty shelves, and it felt very real. So those are the exact type of cases, and where you can draw out that human emotion, whether it be highlighting a character in the story, the victim or someone that's impacted, to make it feel real. And like I said there, with the empty shelves, the sandwiches, people recognize that. They felt that because that impacted their day-to-day life. So when you find that moment in those stories, that's the stories that you want to take forward because people relate to it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. One final question for you, Adam. In terms of how you tell these stories, what do you think is best? Should you turn them into videos? Should you do written stories? Should it be just conversations like we're having? Or should it be all of these things?
Yeah, I think all of these things, really. And I would say, depending on the person. So some people might not like to be in front of a camera and talking, and they may prefer the written word. Whatever suits you. All of them are absolutely legitimate. But if you find that you're a better writer, write. If you find that you cannot stand writing, you're no good at it, and you want to be in front of a camera, whichever way you communicate best is the way for you. Getting that message out there is the most important thing.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for some fantastic advice there. We're definitely going to get you back on a future podcast episode because I can imagine you've got a whole ton of other information and advice that you can share on cybersecurity. So just tell us briefly about Heimdall. What do you guys do, and what should MSPs who are listening to this or watching this do if they want to have a conversation about improving the cybersecurity of their clients?
Certainly, yeah. So Heimdall are a unified security platforms. We cover network, we cover endpoint detection, and we cover the identity layer. So essentially, if you are an MSP, I am sure you'll be using at least one of the products we offer. We cover everything from ransomware encryption to email security. So if you want to find out more, then go to our website, which is heimdallsecurity.com. heimdall.com. And equally, a little plug for my webinars as well. I run a webinar every month. So heimdallsecurity.com/webinars, where I run one webinar as a product webinar, and the other webinar is all about threat intelligence, the latest threats from that month. We have guests as well. So those two options are a way you learn more about Heimdall.
For MSPs around the world, the MSP Marketing Podcast with Paul Green.